Hello and welcome to our Thoropace special. PTF here from In the Money Media. Been working in partnership with Thoropace, exciting new handicapping product. And you know what? You can sign up for your own account for free. How cool is that? InTheMoneyPodcast.com/Thoropace. We'll show that URL again at the end. I am joined here today by a man who works with me on In the Money Plus and has been very active with Thoropace over the last few months. He is Tyler Whisman. Tyler, how are things?
Doing well. Good morning, Pete.
Good morning to you, my friend. We're popping up that Thoropace report right now, and this show's going to have several different pieces to it, and we're going to start with an overview. There have been some more improvements to Thoropace. Do you have this now where you're pretty happy with this? Is this pretty close to the product that's going to go to launch, or are you continuing to improve and tweak as you go along?
I think so. So we've launched this new format at the start of the month, and with that we've basically combined what amounts to 3 different products into now a single download for our customers. Again, and you can sign up for that free account, and it will remain free throughout the remainder of February. So you have a few more days to play around with it before we launch our quote paid version. So I think that we'll talk through the 3 different sections, if you will, of the Thoropace report now. And we'll just start with the first page here. And so, with the Thoropace product, right, the most basic, or the start, if you will, of Thoropace is this initial sheet that comes up. And, we refer to this as the Thoropace forecast. And basically all the tracks, so again, we're referring to the races on February 18th, so Saturday. And you can see in short order, you kind of get all of the tracks within kind of a single page, if you will. And the benefit, or at least how I use this, is, we're showing the projected pace based on our Thoropace data for all of the races across the country that we, have in scope, if you will. And with that, we kind of assign the pace rating based on a 70-point scale. So if you just, look to the far left, you see in the far blue section, those are the most negative pace, which would be -35, which would be races that are very speed favoring. To the far right, you see to the darker red, +35, which would be races that favor stretch runners or closer, if that's your preferred moniker, if you will. We also show, based on our speed point assignments, the most likely leader or leaders in each of the races. And so for me, again, kind of, the intent behind this is, yes, we'll talk about some of the races for Saturday, but I want to give people just a glimpse as to how I use this. So I start my handicapping process now with this forecast in mind, right? And so the first thing that I do is kind of scan through all of the races and look for extreme pace scenarios. So that could be extreme speed favoring races or races that are clearly going to favor stretch runners. I will say, obviously, if you have a race that is going to, on the surface, favor stretch runners, it's very much subject to scratches, right? So, I kind of start my process there. But if the main speed scratch out, obviously, you need to revisit what you're trying to accomplish there.
Eventually, Tyler, will there be a way to get a post-scratches update? Is that the idea?
Yeah, so we do update the product typically a couple of times a day, right? And so obviously, what we're looking at today is for tomorrow's racing, and therefore we won't have the scratches till probably about 11 to 12 Eastern time, given some of the early scratch times, right? So some cards starting early, we can adjust, right? But it is a bit of a manual process, so the time isn't exactly 11 a.m. on the nose, if you will. So, but yes, our products will update typically a couple of times, once for East Coast racing, once for West Coast racing in a given day.
Makes perfect sense. And obviously that, so when you're talking about having to guess about scratches, that's a temporary phenomenon. You can go back much closer to and hopefully have that info. But as you were saying, you start the process here, and I absolutely get it. I mean, and I like this format very much as well, to be able to just scan through rather easily. Let's say I'm looking at my the cross country, and you know the races, and it just gives you that other idea. Maybe you're a time form user, maybe you cross reference with that, maybe you don't bother with that, maybe you just start here and use this as your pace guidance.
Exactly. And another thing that this has done for me too, right, is like I've found myself playing races that I probably wouldn't have otherwise looked at,
Right.
tracks that I otherwise wouldn't have looked at. Houston, Sam Houston on the screen here now, right? Like the race 9 there, it would appear that, that's clearly prior to scratches or a race that's going to favor stretch runners, right? So it might give an extra look there. Gives you an excuse to listen to Nick, and all is well.
Yeah, but whether or not you can get a bet down, so the
That's
subject
true.
of complexities at the moment, but the idea stands. I'm also thinking, just I mean, for contest players, what an amazing resource this is. You're looking for optional races. For me personally, I'd want to go right to these extreme scenarios like that Sam Houston ninth, if applicable.
Yeah, clearly with the NHC coming up, so we do a fair amount of our early users are heavy contest players, and I think the feedback is, one, they like the new format, but two, it's just a quick way to scan through races and kind of get a real sense as to where they might be able to make a few plays, and might make a contest, whether it's a feeder or a cash event worth playing. So.
Makes sense. Where shall we go from here?
Let's go to the second product, which is, I believe on your report, starts on page 4, right? And so these are just kind of all in one PDF, so you have to scan through, and this will be our spotlight plays. So essentially what this has done is taking, basically what Thoropace is doing is we are trying to identify speed runners that are getting a favorable setup or stretch runners that are getting a favorable setup in the context of today's races. If you scroll down a little bit more, you can see the actual play. So
Yep.
the top part there will kind of explain what it is that we're trying to articulate here. But basically, if you look at these races, we kind of present with our carrots or up arrows or down arrows for horses that have they're getting a better setup today or getting a tougher setup today. And so obviously those that are kind of have the green arrows would represent potential value based on the setup that they're projected to get in today's race. And there's a little bit of, or a lot of it, right, of taking the past race or the past 2 races and putting that into context here, right? So this is all relative to the races that they're coming out of. It's a little bit better to explain when we go to the next factor, but this is essentially like races and horses specifically that it's worth definitely taking a second look at, and then going down to the bottom where you get the horses with the red carrots. This is an equally strong angle, which is horses that you can probably fade, right? So it is stretch runners that are getting a much softer pace, right? So they're not going to get the pace that they close into in their previous race, and therefore you might want to overlook them today. So there's value that can be created a couple of different ways with this. I don't necessarily in my own handicapping use this this section of the product on its surface. These are not blind bets for me. But I will say the thing that I find most valuable with this is if you look to the far right over there, or second to last column, if you will, the vertical values, right? And so, going back up to the greens, those are horses that I'm definitely going to look if I decide to play the race, where I will try to key in on that race. So I believe if we look, there's Fairgrounds race 8, where there is a Keith DeSormo runner that is going against a couple of heavy hitters in the banishing race, where that horse overcame a very slow pace in its last race, got up to win, and is now, because of the 2 runners banishing and first offense, I believe, will get a much hotter pace today, right? And so, granted, that horse has to improve a lot, but there's a tremendous amount of vertical value. That horse is sitting at 15-1. So that is a race that I will look at and hope to maybe either split with, the top pair with that Keith DeSormo runner, or potentially, place a small bet if they were to hook up and that horse was to come running late, because we've seen DeSormo do that before, definitely in Fairgrounds. So.
For sure. Did you want to demo anything further in the doc, or
I think let's
head
move
back
to
up
just
top?
the first page of kind of the main detailed report, right? I think there's a lot that can, so if we go down and, obviously Aqueduct kind of showing up there on the page, there's a lot that can be viewed just from this alone, right? And so, if you look at the Aqueduct races that, the first race that you see there, you'll notice a couple of things. One is the forecast says NA, right? And that has to do with us not having data on the 3-horse Saratoga Red. So when we don't have objective data, we're not going to produce an actual forecast for the race. But an improvement for this iteration of the product is to the far right, you can see the pace points that are there. And that can give you an idea, even if you have a horse that we don't have data on, which is either going to be a first-time starter or a first-time North American horse, where we don't have that objective data to insert into the algorithm. You can get a pretty good sense of how this race is going to play out. So, on the surface, it would look like either the 1A or the 2 is clearly going to be vying for the lead, but there really isn't an abundance of pace here, right? So, either one of those 2 horses probably has a decent chance. Granted, both would have to improve. And the reason that I say that, and again, this isn't one of the races that we wanted to feature, I'm just trying to articulate a few things that the value of this is that you can see to the right of the horse's names. So Hot Rod Lincoln 91.1, that is our Thoropace fig, which is a recent ability fig. That's how I would describe it. It's not meant to be kind of a standalone product or figure at this time, but it's more or less our proprietary figure that gives you a sense for the horse's ability. And it's, you can kind of relatively see, well, okay, does this horse need to improve in order to compete in today's races? So pace is one thing, but they still ultimately have to be fast enough to win the race or hit the board.
A bit like a power rating in football. Is that a fair
correct?
Fair
Yes.
description of it? Yeah.
And so, if you move down to the second race there, you can see where, we have a Thoropace forecast of plus 2.9. That's a neutral setting. But now you start seeing where there's a red box around some of the runners, right? So the 3-horse there, you can see the red box around it. And so basically that horse was pressing the pace in a minus 27.0. So, minus 27.0 means that should favor horses that are forward speed horses. And that horse was either unable to overcome or to benefit from that, or they did benefit from it. And today's pace is, not quite as favorable, if you will. And so that would be the red box is a horse that is, pace advantaged in their previous race, or the race where the red box is around it. And therefore, that's a horse that I'm going to be quite critical of in the context of today's race, if you will. If you go down to race 3, you can see the 5-horse Falconet. You see a green box around that horse. And that green box means that horse was stalking a pace of plus 29, which means that theoretically that should have favored stretch runners, right? And so that's a horse that I want to take a second look at. Again, we're not handicapping, just trying to illustrate a few examples of how the product can be useful. So,
and these red and green boxes, Tyler, they appear in the actual report, or did you put these here just to highlight these horses for us?
No, these are in the actual report now, right? And so, you can see at the bottom of these pages, you'll see, the key, if you will, that says, green box pace disadvantaged, red box pace advantage, right? And so you kind of have to flip in your mind, right? Like, I'm going to downgrade horses, if you will, that have a red box around them potentially, or I potentially may upgrade horses that have a red box around them. Again, that's all in the context of what today's forecast is for a given race. So we'll put a finer point on some of these, details as we walk through a couple of the races. So we're just going to jump around. One of the things that you'll realize, since we can't produce a forecast for every single race, like maiden races, for instance, where I have a lot of first-time starters, it's difficult to have an objective view if you're providing a pace product with horses that you don't have any objective data on, and we're not going to guess. So we'll start our conversation at Fairgrounds. I know that there's probably some detailed coverage on In the Money Plus, so I would encourage people to check that out either today or tomorrow. But I did want to highlight a couple of things. And actually, if you want to stop there at Fairgrounds race 9, I think it's kind of interesting, right? Like I don't want to necessarily handicap this race, but this is a turf sprint that has a minus 35.0. And basically you can see all the blue in the running lines of the past 2 running lines. And these horses are, basically tripping over each other to get to the back. And they're doing so in races that featured slow paces. So, theoretically, you look at the 10 and 11 horses there, the only ones that have red figures, which again are pace points, if you will, which indicates that they will be forwardly placed. And so, both of them may offer a little bit of value. Clearly, they would need to improve or take advantage of that pace scenario to win, but perhaps a little bit of value there. So, the race that I really wanted to talk about at Fairgrounds, though, was race 10, the Mine Shaft. And if you look at the pace forecast for that race, it's plus 1.3, which is, it's clearly a neutral setting, but you can see there that the number 6 Happy American has a green box around his last race. And so obviously a couple of horses, including Run Classic, that was a weirdly run race where Run Classic was pulled back, figured to get the lead. I'm not sure exactly, what tactics that horse will employ. And there's nobody that clearly, has a ton of speed points that's going to run away from this. And obviously that's how we get the neutral setting. That said, Happy American was able to overcome a fairly slow pace, a minus 27 in his last race, to win that race. And so, even at a plus 1.3 is going to get a better setup today. Yeah. So the only negative, and again, this is where Thoropace is the start of my process, but not the only part of my process. So I want to be very clear of that. This horse spots the entire field 6 pounds of weight. And that's not insignificant to horses that are very similar in ability. So yes, we'll get a better setup, but can the horse overcome, that weight that he's spotting the rest of the field? The other horse that I want to talk about is Hoist the Gold, the one horse. So there's a specific work, that this horse has on January 29th, a bullet work. The barn is, literally could not be colder. I understand this. This horse has never gone 2 turns, but definitely has a pedigree that I think is interesting on a stretch out. Has a similar profile into Happy American, and that, kind of does his best running in the middle or late stages of the race. And so I just think it's an interesting horse. If he gets ignored, the horse, for whatever reason, is not necessarily a win machine, but always attracts a little bit of attention and money. Some of that and most of that mine throughout the past few races.
Well, I'll tell you what we can do, Tyler. We appreciate you coming on here. And when we do, I'm not 100% sure yet. It's not booked yet, but for the last bunch of big Fairgrounds days, we have had Frank McGoey on the In the Money Plus side. He's obviously up there in the clocker booth on the weekend. The 29th of January was a Sunday, so he would have been there. So I'll specifically ask Frank about that work. We can get you some inside info on the inthemoneypodcast.com/plus side of things.
Yeah, I think again, it's a horse that I think could offer a little bit of value, perhaps underneath. I still, if I was to make a selection, is the tepid favorite, Happy American. My guess is the barn's going well. The horse ran well last out. Likely takes a little bit more money than the money line would suggest, but I think is a pretty reliable horse even with the weights. And I might try to get Hoist the Gold underneath with that runner. So
that makes sense. And pending that. Excuse me. My goodness, I don't think I've ever sneezed on air before. And pending that clocker report, we can maybe do more. Thank you.
Great. Well, yeah, I'll be listening for Frank's, analysis of that horse. So again, has to overcome a very cold barn, but we'll see. I like the horse. Let's move on to Gulfstream Park Race 11. So it's the Royal Delta Stakes. I know that this is features a runner that you've had quite a bit of affection for in the past, and Kathleen O. But this is an interesting comeback spot. Relatively short field. The race, if you will, gets a minus 8.0, which is technically a neutral setting, but she's probably going to be last or second to last based on the pace points that you see there. Coming off the layoff, she's definitely not going to get a setup that would favor her closing kick. Now, I understand that she's 3 for 3 over the track, and clearly her best races last year were over this Gulfstream Park strip. The barn is doing fine right now, but I think that there were a couple of other horses that were more interesting to me. The number 3 Midnight Stroll, I think, is probably going to be on or near the lead, and I think is worth a look here. Has never raced at Gulfstream Park, but again, just kind of gets a race. The pace would favor this runner's style. Another horse that I think I was initially more excited about was going to be Classy Edition, but that horse kind of has that red box around it. Was forward in a race that featured a speed favoring pace in its last. So, you're going to get a little bit more pace theoretically today. So again, I don't want to toss Classy Edition for Hot Barn and connections, but again, just wanted to mention this race to say that Kathleen O might be a little bit vulnerable on
I
the.
agree. For what it's worth, I agree. This is one of the races JK and I will be covering over on our Coast to Coast show. And as much as I like Kathleen O, I mean, you spelled it out. I do think Classy Edition has a chance to. I love that recency. I mean, and I know what you mean in terms of. I understand why the red box is there, but I feel like she's got an opportunity to take advantage. But I'll take another look at Midnight Stroll based on your say so. That's an interesting read. That she may be the one that ends up with the best trip of all in this spot. But I think this is a great example of how the product can give you a chance to question a horse like Kathleen O, who's going to be what, even money in this spot, if not shorter.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I definitely can view her as a vulnerable favorite to be sure. So let's quickly.
Frank just texted me and he confirmed that he will be participating in the Money Plus show. So we've got that good news for
All right, good news.
Who are playing Fairgrounds.
Okay, let's move on to Laurel Race 8. So we'll take a quick look at the Barbara Fritchie. And so this is a race that features another horse that's been prominent on these airwaves and past the Champagne, who now cuts back in this place in this spot. So plus 3.1, definitely another race that has a neutral rating. Nothing really stands out here to me other than to say, I do like the cutback for this horse and think that, there's not a positive and extreme scenario one way or the other. I think if she's good enough in this spot, she should win. Again, it's just definitely like the cutback. The race at Laurel that I really wanted to talk about was the next race. And right, I only mentioned past the Champagne because it might be a double play for me, which into race 9, the General George Stakes, which has a plus 11.4. And I think that, again, another neutral setting. However, there's one runner that I think is worth looking at, and that is Yodeliyehu. So, you look at the race, which is a common race with the horse on the outside. But I think that this is a stretch runner that's, basically spotted the field 6 or 7 lengths in the last race, closed for second. It was a weird race because they didn't really show the gallop out. So I'm not sure exactly what happened past the wire, but definitely was closing, into a race that just absolutely featured speed runners. To be fair, the winner who's in this race on the outside was mid-pack as well, but was still 4 or 5 lengths ahead of the 4-horse Yodelehi. So, this horse is 10-1 on the morning line. I will note it's 0 for 8 at 7 furlongs and has never won at Laurel. Definitely a couple of negatives, but I think the price compensates. And when you look at Jamie Ness, he's 9 for 27 the last 21 days at Laurel. So that's 33% win clip with a $2.79 ROI and 70% in the money. So, maybe you think that this horse is not good enough, but for me, this horse is an absolute must use underneath and a horse that I would, definitely key in verticals. And like I said, we'll probably play some small doubles from the number 3 past the Champagne in the previous race.
It's a compelling case for sure for getting involved at Laurel today. I think next we were going to head out to Oaklawn.
I think so. Yeah. Let's quickly look at, we can look at race 8. Again, just want to mention race 8 real quickly because I think this is another opportunity for a double play, if you will. So the horse that I wanted to talk about here was number 3 Congressman. So this is a plus 13.7. So, I think that this horse is, a very solid horse, fits well, figures to trip out quite well. Should favor stretch runners but this horse I kind of envision getting a dream trip behind, sitting 3rd or 4th, perhaps, just off the leaders in this race. And I think, is just probably the best horse in the race. So, moving to race 9, you kind of see that this is a little bit faster, plus 15.5 on the forecast. And there's a horse that I'm kind of, against, if you will. And that is going to be the against Westworld Power. So, with that in mind, likely favorite. I want to see if I can create a little bit of value in this spot. And I'm actually going to be looking to the number 7 Last Samurai. So I think that there's enough pace that this horse could benefit from. You do see a couple of horses that you have basically green boxes around them. However, I'm putting that into context that they're not really getting a softer pace today, right? So, maybe they are good enough, but that's one where it's not just every time you see a green box, it's an automatic, use for that horse. It has to be put into context of today's race. And so again, with me, I'm going to try to pair Congressman into a double with the number 7 Last Samurai. This will be the best setup this horse has got in a while. Gets Lasix again, gets some weight from a couple of the top horses. So I do think that there's a world in which this horse benefits greatly from the pace, and that's going to be one that I use quite a bit.
Makes sense. And just, I mean, I should have gone over this earlier, but just to underline for people, the stats here that or the representations we're seeing are what the horse did in the last start, and then to the right, what the horse did two back. Is that
Correct? Yes.
correct?
Sorry, I didn't make that clear. But yeah, you can see where in this race, you can see where Trademark was pressing the pace in a plus 31. Obviously, was pace disadvantaged in that race. Gets a little bit better pace setup today, but still, I think there's more upside with Last Samurai, who just has come out of races that really have kind of all been negative, if you will, using our scale, which favors speed runners. It's a horse that typically does his best running late, and I think that gets the best setup of definitely the past year or so, looking back at his races, and I think might be good enough. Definitely another vertical key, but might be good enough to win this as well at a big price.
You had one at your home track, Turfway. What are we looking at there?
Yeah, so the last race that I wanted us to talk about was the race 6, the Dust Commander Stakes, and this is a race that on the surface, right, it came up a little bit faster than I was expecting, right, and so I was wanted to feature this race just because I was hoping and thinking that there would be enough of a lack of pace, if you will, in which the favorite In Love might be a little vulnerable, right. That said, I'm not sure that materialized once I look at the data objectively. So In Love, definitely a stretch runner. The forecast says plus 16.7, which should favor stretch runners. To be fair, I actually was going to give a little bit of a look to Beatbox, though, the horse on the rail. So this horse won the race last year, defending champ in this race. The barn is going very well. It just seemed like a horse that might trip out well even from the rail. And I thought, would be ahead of In Love probably throughout the race, and has kind of shown a little bit more speed, and I just think could hold on at a bigger price. So I wanted to highlight this race because I thought on my just looking through the field that this would be a little bit better I guess scenario to talk through. But I do think that In Love could be vulnerable in this spot. Obviously won the last race at Turfway Park. I get that, but just does not seem like it will get the exact same setup here from a pace perspective.
Fair enough. Fair enough. What else do we want to go over or leave the people with today, Tyler?
So, again, I think that we can remind them how to sign up for the free account. So inthemoneypodcast.com/Thoropace, so that's now across the screen. If you're watching this on YouTube, which I would recommend, I think hopefully this visual helps. I think it's worth, just loading the product. You can sign up for a free account. We don't require any sort of credit card or anything like that. For our free account. And once we even kind of go live with our paid, we're still going to give away the data on Mondays and Tuesdays. So it's kind of in your best interest to sign up now, get familiar with the product. We've had some good feedback on the new format, and I think people are slowly figuring out how to use it. We're trying to make it as intuitive as possible. I will also say too that we're always welcome to feedback. So if you use the product and have some feedback that you want to provide to us, please feel free to do that. You can do that through the website, which the link here gets you to, or you can find me on Twitter. So
as time goes on, Tyler, do you see maybe putting together some small format or even one-on-one assistance for paying customers who come in at a certain level? Is that something you've thought about doing?
Yeah, I think we're open to a lot of different things, right? I think we're still in the process of just getting people used to how to best use it, how to best incorporate it into their handicapping and wagering process. So I think that we appreciate the platform that you've offered here, the partnership with Thoropace in general, just feedback on the product, the the display, like, and how everything that we've gotten to today. So thank you for your input there. And I will say too that this is an iterative process, right? Like we are continuously, looking for angles that, either generate a positive ROI, or things that have a very negative ROI that we can, again, kind of going back to the spotlight plays, horses that we may want to fade a little bit. So we continue, as of this week, to just continue to generate new approaches and new processes, and I think that we can definitely promise to constantly improve the product, and be receptive to feedback.
I like it. I know just some of the very, very beta ideas you have are exciting too, for ways it can continue to improve. So we thank you for your time today. We encourage folks. I haven't said enough for those who are listening. InTheMoneyPodcast.com/Thoropace, THOROPACE. But even in the notes for the pod version of this, Tyler, I'm going to try to send people over to YouTube, because obviously it helps so much to see it. But I think you explained it well enough that it's worth popping the audio up there as well. So we'll cover all the bases, and hopefully we'll have you back on soon to talk In the Money Plus and to talk about some of the more exciting developments on the Thoropace side. Thank you so much for your time today.
All right. Thanks, Pete. Good luck this weekend.
We'll thank Tyler one more time. This is PTF. Check out all the other content we have on the network and over on the Plus side this weekend and beyond. And may you win all your photos.